introduce yourself and your go first, please. Okay. It's not working, but okay.
My name is Siqi. My film title is Sister.
My name is Joon Kim. I'm a director of Field Turns.
Hello. I'm Uson, director of Afterwork.
I'm Slabe, and I wrote and co-directed Lost and Found.
Hi, I'm Eusong, director of My Moon.
I'm Jake Nelson, the Backward Astronomer.
I'm Baena, the director of Noria.
Thank you all for being here today. I'm just going to ask a couple of very general, stupid questions, and then I want to pass it off to the audience as best possible. So, first off, obviously this is a very unique section, very different from our other sections, of course. And so, very first, my question is, why animation? Why do you choose this medium for your story? Anyone like to take it?
When I write, I don't usually lean into animation, knowing how arduous a process it is. Some stories I think work best as animation. I know mine was a stop motion, which was about a doll unraveling, and I just, with me and my co-director, we thought the obvious choice to get the most visceral response was to actually have stop motion so we could see wool tearing. And so that's why I leaned towards stop motion. I wouldn't choose it for anything else, it's just too hard. Yeah.
In my case, the main character is a cartoon, so obvious.
I just choose animation because in my style of animation, the budget's very low, and I don't have to wait for anybody. It's the only way to get pure creative freedom. It's all do it all myself.
Well, in my case, animation definitely gives me a bit more, like you said, like a freedom to any locations or any sequence, and there's a bit more forgiving, more generous about the medium that let me tell a story compared to live action. So I think I kind of always gear towards to that, and elements that will play the best as animation.
Yeah, my background is visual effects, but for visual effects, I worked with many live action stuff. But usually for the live actions, we need like big crews. But for my shorts, I wrote it first, but I was my own, so I was only the artist I have in my pocket. So I choose animation. There was no way.
I think for me, it's just everything work for promotion. So I still films and stop motion, and the reason I love it because I love the material. I think the material itself can add so much to the film just by itself, and then it's also a very enjoyable process to do the film, and it's the way that I can show my personal stories in that material, and then create a work that I can have full control and do whatever I want with the best experience.
So that's kind of interesting to me, because you say it's enjoyable. Yeah. Down here, I think I heard that it's arduous.
I didn't even animate it, so I had the easy part of it. I watched my animator spend 12 hours days behind a black curtain.
So on that, I wanted my second question. As you're creating the story, as writers, as storytellers, how much does the animation process affect that story? Does that story change entirely when you were going through this? What comes first?
I wrote the script knowing it was going to be animation, and the more I started to kind of be involved in the animation process and learning about the workflow, the more I learned about how much you need to strip back. As soon as you start kind of building your animatic and knowing what can fit in the scene and what the mobility of the puppet is, how limited your budget is going to be. You certainly have to think kind of outside the box how to tell the story with less. And what we found luckily was that less was more. The more we stripped it back, the more it was just at the core of it, and we didn't really have I was about to make it a really bad pun. You don't have the fluff around it. But yeah, it turned into a much tighter story because of because the process of animation just required it to be stripped back. Yeah.
In my case, I never had a script. I never write a word of the story. So I started with animated, storyboarding, and editing that with sounds and music and things like that. And it evolved a lot through that process. That takes not every day, but like a year of just going through that. And then when we go into the production stage of producing the real Siqi things, it changed a lot too, right? Probably it's a wrong direction thing, I don't know, but that was my process.
For my film, it took over like 5 years. Back then, I was working at the company, visual effect company, and I worked late. And every time when I came, so it was fun. Yeah.
Oh, how much of your story is affected by animation? I'm asking general stuff. Please take the mic and stop.
Yeah, I think like the process affects a lot of the final film. Like at the beginning, I have this idea, but I don't know exactly what I'm going to do in the film like this. And I do lots of experiments, like just go to the stage and use the material and then see what happens. And sometimes it inspires me, and there's something that I can put in the storytelling, like just use the material itself. So it changed, like because it's my film, so I do everything. So it's kind of free, in the other sense, like I can try once.
Yeah, like you're with it.
Yeah, so it is pretty fun, but also this process is actually a serious film. But yeah, I learned from the process, and I think like for the next film, if I have the team, I know what I need to do. So the next time.
Of course.
I originally wanted to try to do this film in live action, but I have worked with kids before in live action, and that was a nightmare. So my background is as an animator, so I figured that in kind of trying to get what I needed from the performance of the kid and even the monsters, it became easier in animation, even though the process was still a nightmare. But at least it was a manageable nightmare.
Okay, that's all the talking I want to do today. I want to open up to you guys, please. And feel free to be a bit more specific than I have been. We have time for at least a good solid 5-6 questions for everybody. I barely see you there, but
hey,
there, sir.
Sorry to be loud. For the Backward Astronomer, it might have just been the way I was seeing it. You can tell me I'm wrong, but I was wondering, did it seem to me like the appearance of the woman sort of kept shifting a bit throughout? She seemed to just shift appearance. I don't know. Is that something I just saw differently because of the animation, or?
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Oh.
It was not exactly intended, but I don't mind that that happens.
Cool.
I mean, I think there's no confusion that it's one person.
Yeah.
Or is there? Is there?
I guess you could just be like, I don't know. I mean,
Were you confused if it was the same person? Or?
No, it didn't confuse me. It almost made me wonder if you were talking in a sense of the viewpoint of every man's kind of ideal woman in that situation, and how they would appear to them. So, hey, use that for your next Q&A.
No, I'm gonna use that. I'd call that a happy accident.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I was wondering if you have any advice for artists who want to break into animation who haven't gone to school for it.
I think doing a short film is a very good way to at least start knowing people of the industry. So if you have time and you have the kind of tools to do it, I would say do a short film. It's a very good way to do it.
Also, I didn't go to animation school, so this was my one of the tests I started, and this is the result. So you can just start making shorts.
Nice to start. See another hand up there? Oh yeah, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Just one last thing. I mean, I went to art school for animation and started working in animation industry in LA as well. But I do see a lot of people who come into animation with like since just from right out of high school, like interning at animation companies and stuff. And I think something that I always notice incredible is like sometimes short film can feel like too much or overwhelming, and it was to me too when I first entered the school or just trying to make it doing a full-time job and all that stuff. And I think it's so important to just do what you want to do, like just like a little by little, like taking it like a baby step, whether you do want to do more design or storytelling, or if writing is a hard one because it's so hard to get people to read your stuff. But today, like social media is like biggest tool in animation industry, and not that I quite like that medium, but I think it's if you want to get into it, I'll really encourage just doing little by little at a time and share it with friends. Yeah, I think that was like really helpful.
When I was at school, I used to teach high school students for animation. I think like it's actually really easy for you to get started. Like you don't need really fancy programs or like skills to get started. Like we just use Dragon Frame is a stop motion software. But like it works with other medias too. Like we teach kids to use cutouts and we just use clays to get you a sense of animation, how to create animation. And then we have really good films come out. It's like students, they have really good ideas and perspective. I mean, and then like and there are a bunch of like tutorials online. You can just check out on YouTube, many websites. So it's I think just to get started.
Also, I learned animation in the 90s, and there was a strong emphasis on the software. And my advice would just be to just not get stuck on the software, but just more kind of like what you can do with the software. Because right now there's like a million versions every other week of a million softwares. So for me, just learn one, stick with it, and start creating.
I heard a fun analogy that goes along with that. When you go to a restaurant, you don't think about the pots and pans that the chef uses to cook something. The software is just a tool. What's important is your eye and your voice.
See that one last question up there? Thank you for your patience.
So, when you're creating your worlds and your characters, like what's most important to you?
What is more important, like the world or the character, or?
No, like what's important when you're creating like the world and the characters, like together?
Okay. In my case, I care more about characters, not that much about the world that they inhabit. I don't know. For me, it needs to feel. I don't know. Someday I wake up and I say, okay, I have it. I have the guy in my head, but it needs to be not a cliche or like a metaphor of something. It needs to be like a real person, even if it's a cartoon, right? It needs to be real. So when I got this and I feel I'm not using a cliche, but I have a real character, then I go for the story. That's my approach.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I mean, I have a lot of fun creating the world, but the first version of the story was set in an alleyway, And long story short, we needed to transpose it into the sushi bar. And I noticed that the story didn't really change. Like, it still had the same impact, for at least for me as a writer. When I was writing it and reading it, I still felt that connection. And so I think, yeah, as long as the characters are truthful to you, I've found that it can connect with other people as well. So I suppose honesty, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these two answers definitely, I agree with wholeheartedly. But I guess one more thing to add is, for me, like when you set up a couple of characters, or even when you start thinking about one character, I always believe to make that one character more authentic or believable, you always need surroundings, like secondary characters, or always the opposing character, or how all these characters kind of make dynamics. And in that conversation, or the like putting next to each other, like that to me like really makes a good characters and the environments, the world that they create, or how they see things. And it's also like more fun for me to start thinking about, like, if you just put two characters in an empty room, like what's going to happen, like how do they react, or how do they bounce off each other. Like that to me was, I think, one of the biggest thing when I was start writing about characters. It helped me a lot to think that way.
I think most important for me is having people relate to my film and relate to the character and connect to it and pay attention. And I think it's a challenge to make a universal story that everyone relates to. But it's another reason I like animation, is because you can stylize your character. You don't have to show a real person's face. And when somebody watches the film, they see that face and maybe they don't look like them. But with animation, I'm always striving to keep it loose and show a human being and not necessarily show too much specifics about that person. So it's always a fine line I'm trying to ride.
I think for me, at least in this project, the whole time for me, the question I kept asking was, like, do I care about any of that is happening? Do I give a shit? And I think that went on through each department and each stage of the rewrites, or whatever we were adding or subtracting. The question was always like, am I caring for whatever is happening? Because if I'm not, then I'm not only wasting my time, I'm wasting your time.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Then we have there, sir.
In your films, was any of it based off of real life experiences, or was the majority of it just like imagination to tell the story?
I found that when I first conceptualized the story, I tend to try and make stories that are high concept and fun, because it's fun kind of telling someone the story in one sentence and getting a reaction. But what I found when I was writing it, and throughout the whole process of making it, there was a lot of rewriting throughout it. I mean, it was 3 to 4 years to make it from pen down to final cut. And I found that I was relating it on stuff that had happened in my life. I had gone through my first 2 relationships and first 2 breakups, and it was kind of interesting seeing, because I co-directed it with someone, and when these events in my life were happening, which affected me, I would be kind of trying to sway the ending with how I was kind of viewing it at the time, and my co-director was often the first to say, I think you need to take that hat off and just see the film, because that's going to oscillate, as the more experience you have. But
So do you mind if I ask, are you happy with it?
Yes. Right now, I like my ending. I feel like a lot of people have a different approach to the ending, which I love. I love that, to be able to create something and someone has a completely new take on it. Like it no longer belongs to me. But for me, I've got my own interpretation of the ending, and for me, leaving it unanswered, for me, says a lot more about the Fox's character that character's no longer doing it for reward, she's doing it for, just giving away the gender. You're giving it away, that character's doing it for something higher. But yeah, I think did I answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks. Anyone else?
Similarly, I also tried to influence the ending of my story based on my experiences. I didn't write the Backward Astronomer. It's written by Jade James, who's at the festival as well. But I kept trying to make it a happy ending. Like, she comes to the moon with her pillow, and really sweet, heartwarming ending. But he said no. Jade was very, very strong about that. But I'm in a happy relationship, and I wanted to convey that. But he wasn't having it. He said it would change the feeling of the story.
For me, my short started from my own experience. When I work in visual effects company, they usually working very late. So I'm from New York, and I usually take subway home. And I was in the subway. I saw my face changing every day. I saw my face getting old each time. Every time when I saw the reflection of my face, it was getting old. So I saw I'm changing, and at that moment, I saw when I passing the dark side, someone was opening the door, like in the far back. It might be like someone strange guy or homeless guy, but he was opening the door and he was entering to somewhere, that place I don't know. So I was thinking about what about where he's going, and I thought about what's going on after the like underground, what's happening. And on that day, when I went to sleep, I just typed something onto my cell phone and it started from there.
For my film sister, it's definitely some real life experience. It's my own story and the story of my friends. Like the film is about one-child policy in China, which was enforced in China for over 35 years. And I was born during that time. And actually, I'm the second child in the family. But when I was born, my family they went through a lot of trouble trying to keep me, and then eventually I was born. So, but I grew up in that time, and then I have lots of friends who grew up alone, like they are the only child in the family, and then they're not lucky enough to have siblings like me. So, so when I was writing the story, I definitely know I want to write a story about having a sibling and what it feels like to have one, and what it feels like to not have one. Yeah, it is. It's based on my experience and on my purpose.
Okay, that'll be personal.
Can you give someone a signal balance tonight?
So my film was definitely like loosely based on my own experience, but at the same time, I know it's always like a collage of experiences that you end up reflecting in bits of different, like a spread out film, like, because I always end up questioning like, what would actually this guy feel, or what would this look like? Like if you're talking about like happy relationship, like what does it look like? Or is it, if it's a relationship, there's all the emotional part, but no like the practical part. Like is it still like good relationship? Like I think when I was writing it, like early 20s, I never really like thinking about getting into a relationship with somebody. Also like into work. And then in the mid-20s, I started thinking about like, what is like a good relationship, and I had a lot of questions and confusions in many ways. And I think this film kind of has that weird grayness of like, this is sweet, but it's also terrible. Like it's like morally wrong, but like, oh, but it's kind of sweet though. Like, and it's funny. I was talking to this with my friend actually just the other day, where. However you think what good story is or whatever, we objectively all think about like, oh, that story from that film was good, that. But when you make something, you always end up reflecting who you are at that very moment. Especially when you're making something of your own, without like executives telling you like, this is how you make it. Yeah, I think at the time I was definitely like searching for a lot of things, and And as much as more of a questioning or statement of its own, I get the time myself. I get different reactions of like some people say like, oh, that character is terrible, or this character I relate, or like everyone has a different perspective on top of the ending that I had, which I think is a good thing. I mean, it's like a good conversation always. It's interesting to listen to other people's view on the good relationship. So yeah, I think it's inevitable at one point to make it not personal. I mean, to make it personal.
In my case, it was like a mix. Some moments in there were kind of like emotions that I had gone through at different times. It wasn't autobiographical or anything like that. And then I also just wanted to add fantastical elements to it. So I just, did it like a smoothie. I just put it in the blender and see what happened.